Okay, go ahead.
That was my question. I was gonna ask if you were gonna record so we can go back and watch it if we wanted to.
Ah, look at that. We're on the same page. Absolutely. And I didn't know what your question was, so I wanted to make sure I got it on the recording. So yeah, good, really good question. Okay, so we're at 8:30, guys. So if y'all want to get started, this I'm trying something new here. My reviews may in the future all be Zoom, so that way people that are taking it virtually, we all have to take the tests face to face, but there are some students because of family reasons and other reasons are watching the stream. So at least this gives them a chance to interact during the reviews, ask questions, and that kind of stuff. So also, I want to point out while y'all are getting your questions ready that I'm going to be available for virtual office hours. That means text, that means FaceTime, that means if we need to set up a Zoom meeting to clarify things, I have no problem with it. But just remember, like, this all should be clarification, right? Fine tuning. If you need a detailed explanation on anything, that's what the old lectures are for. So I say old lectures, this semester's lectures, but then I've also posted some old resource lectures just to kind of get it a second dose of the information. So all of that is available to you guys should you need a refresher on any particular concept. Okay. All right. Anybody want to break the ice?
Can you go over some of the examples you gave with the trunk exercises and then trunk stretches as well, please?
Let's Sure. Let's first make sure we repeat the concepts because remember I am trying to get us to where we don't have to and Suen, I'm not saying you're doing this. This is just me being a teacher talking to everybody that we are not just trying to memorize every single type of exercise and stretch because it's darn near impossible. There's just so many variations and so many things. So I'm trying to emphasize the concepts. So we have muscles that pull in every direction of motion. True. And so how does our trunk move? Our trunk flexes and extends. So we're going to have trunk flexors and trunk extensors, or trunk flexion pullers and extension pullers. And to stretch these muscles, the muscles that are pulling in a direction of trunk flexion, I need to extend the trunk. So anytime we're going to see a stretch that involves trunk extension, or extended position, I'm going to stretch the materials that are pulling in a direction of flexion. The trunk bends side to side. We call that lateral bending, right lateral and left lateral. So if I want to stretch the right laterals, I need to bend to the left. And if I want to stretch the left laterals, I need to bend to the right. Maybe it's easier for me to show you on the neck. If I bend to the right, I'm stretching the ones that pull to the left. And if I bend to the left, I'm stretching the ones that pull to the right. So I just want to go over that whatever the stretch, it's what is my position, identify the position, and then understand that however I'm positioned, I'm going to be stretching muscles that pull in the opposite direction. That's why if you want to stretch your hamstrings, the extension pullers, you need to flex your hip, right? Um, so I just wanted to be clear that it's a concept thing more than anything. And then I'm going to put the question back on you. I have my Google right here. So give me, and it could be in layman's terms, but you give me, and the reason I'm doing this is to show you that you can practice on Google or so we're practicing learning how to practice. So give me a common exercise that would be working some trunk muscles, and I'm going to Google it, and then we'll go over it together. Okay? What you got?
There was one specifically that the person was laying down
Mm-hmm.
and their leg was crossed over their other leg, but one was straight, one was bent, but their trunk was rotated, and that's what we had focused on. And I just cannot
Okay.
understand that
Okay.
that
So
one
you
that we
want to
did in
do,
class.
okay, no problem. Let me try to find, so like a windshield wiper kind of exercise where they're kind of moving the legs back and forth with the pelvis. Is it kind of like that?
Yes.
Oh, so let me
Yes.
see. Okay. Is it something like this?
Yes.
Okay, no problem. So what I'm going to do is we love to make things isometric to start with, because with no motion it kind of simplifies everything for us to identify agonist and then press play. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you one that I know we've done in class before. I'm trying to get that glare out, guys. Can everybody see that, or is it glary? We're good? That should be good. Can everybody see that? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I know that the him moving the legs isn't a hip thing, it's a pelvis thing. Okay. So the pelvic girdle is going to rotate and fluctuate between right transverse and left transverse pelvic girdle rotation, and the legs are just going to go along for the ride. Does that make sense? That's step one, is just to acknowledge that the pelvis is going to be rotating from right to left. Step one. I also know that because the upper extremity is fixed and the legs are free to move, that the pelvic girdle rotation is going to occur because of trunk motion. In other words, the trunk is going to be the reason the basketball spins. That's step two. Does everybody understand that? Okay. Now what I'm going to do extra steps to try to guide you to the answer. But I also need to remind myself that the pelvic girdle rotation and the trunk rotation are going to seem opposite. What I mean by that is the cap in the bottle. If I want to open and take a sip of water, I need to spin the cap lefty-loosey, but the same relative motion is actually spinning the bottle to the right. Cap and bottle, they move in opposition for the same motion. Okay. So if I want to look at the trunk motion in this exercise, I need to understand that while the pelvis rotates left transverse, the trunk is actually rotating right transverse. And as the pelvis rotates right transverse, the trunk would actually spin left transverse. It's no different than left transverse, left transverse. It's the same concept, just one level lower. Left transverse is my head literally looking to the left, or my body spinning to the right. I still am looking at my left shoulder. Let me know if that makes sense, and then I'll transition to the muscles. Are we so far understanding? Awesome. All right. Now, in terms of agonistic muscles, and this is why I teach you guys to see the group based off of its pull, because if all we did was talk about obliques and externals and internals, that's just names. That doesn't tell us the job. The job is the direction of pull. So gravity in this exercise, or at least him holding this position, is trying to rotate his pelvis to the right, thus trying to rotate his trunk to the left. If gravity is trying to rotate his trunk to the left, I don't need left transverse trunk pullers. If gravity is trying to rotate his trunk to the left and I'm trying to hold this position, I need right transverse trunk rotators. I need right transverse trunk pullers. Does that make sense? I identify who I need to do a job because I see why those muscles need to pull to do the job. And once I identify I need right transverse trunk rotators because this exercise is trying to twist him to the left, my circles help remind me who are those muscles? Who are the muscles that pull in a direction of right transverse trunk rotation? Or your list. But if you're a circle person, you're like, well, who are the right transverse trunk rotators? My left external is trying to twist me to the right, and my left internal, right? Those are trying to twist me to the right, and my right erector spinae. So that's how this works. You identify the agonist based off of pull because you see why you need those muscles to pull. And then your circles or your list just help remind you who are those muscles. Is his
Thank you. That
sternum,
kind of cleared.
you're very welcome. And I want to, for Kennedy's question, isn't his sternum looking at his right hip? In this picture, absolutely. Now keep in mind, there's a mirror effect going on here, so I'm constantly looking so that I can make sure I'm saying it from how you're seeing it, not how I'm seeing it on the computer. So yes, there is his in this picture. Let me try to blow it up. His sternum is looking at his right hip, and that's how I know that he is rotated to his right. However, gravity is also trying to make him rotate more to his right. He could still twist more to his right. So gravity is trying to rotate him to the right, so he would need left. This is a great example of me looking at this and seeing a mirror. Okay. Fun. So I'm going to answer it while looking at the phone, not on the computer. So gravity is trying to rotate his trunk to his right. Gravity is trying to cause right transverse trunk rotation. You do not need right transverse trunk rotators. You would need muscles that are pulling in a direction of left transverse trunk rotation. You would need left transverse trunk rotators. Now that you establish the agonist, you say, who are the left transverse trunk rotators? Right external, left internal, left erector spinae. I was looking at this on the screen and it was a mirror flip. So that's going to remind me from now on, I need to look at my phone as you guys are looking at my phone. But it's the exact same concept, guys. I'm doing a curl, gravity's trying to extend me. I need flexion pullers. I don't want to go straight into bicep. I want to say, who do I need to pull against the weight, against the exercise, against gravity, against the machine? And then once I identify the group based off of its pull, my list and my circles help remind me who those major pullers are. And with this process, then you'll never be fooled. You'll never be, if you keep it consistent, then you won't have to say things like we're working the core or we're working the obliques, but you don't really know which one you're working and which different exercise. You'll be able to say, okay, I'm going right shoulder to left hip. I'm making that happen. I'm using my left transverse trunk rotators, right external oblique, left internal oblique, left erector spinae. It'll help you identify the true specific agonists that's helping to influence motion. But we do this example the same way we do easy examples. Gravity is trying to flex my wrist. I need extension pullers. Who are those muscles? Right? And that's going to be our final, but it's just easy for me to show you. Gravity is trying to do what to the trunk? Gravity is trying to twist the trunk to its right by twisting the pelvis to the left. So gravity's trying to twist the trunk to the right. I don't need right twisty muscles for that. Gravity's already trying to do that. I need left twisty muscles to prevent me from falling, my legs to fall down. And then the circles say, well, who are those muscles? Good. Thank you for that reminder, Kennedy, that I need to look at this directly, not through the prism mirror of the screen. While it's on my mind, do y'all remember the example we did with the planks? Would you like for me to do that one? Anybody?
Yes.
Okay. So we did this one in class. And remember, guys, y'all could go back and rewatch the lectures where we went over them as many times as you want. So for this one, let me make sure I'm looking at it. He is leaning on his left arm. I want to make sure that I'm saying that correctly. Okay, we're cool. So in the lecture, if you go back and rewatch it, I asked, okay, guys, what would be the agonist making his head stay straight, right? Like, what would be the agonist at the cervical preventing his head from falling down? And then what would be the agonist at the trunk preventing the trunk from bending? And if you go rewatch those lectures, I use the example of silly putty that if you stretch it, my two ends of my hands are supporting the ends and gravity's trying to sag the bottom. And that's what's happening here. Gravity's trying to sag the bottom. So if he lets himself down, what motion would that be? Is gravity trying to bend him to his right, or is gravity trying to bend him to his left?
To the right.
That is correct. Very good. Gravity is trying to bend him to the right. And one way you could see that is if, look, here's another picture. If she lowers herself down, her this is a different elbow, sorry. If he lowers himself down, his right shoulder is gonna be close to his right hip. It's bent to the right lateral trunk bending. So because ground and gravity is trying to bend him to his right, he doesn't need right lateral bending pullers. He doesn't need muscles that are also pulling in that same direction. He needs muscles that are pulling in the opposite direction. So his agonist would be left lateral trunk benders or left lateral trunk bending pullers, just to try to make it simple. And then your circles would say, well, who are the muscles on the left side of the belly button? You know, the left rectus, left external, left internal, left erector, or your list. You could say, well, who are the left lateral trunk benders? This muscle, that muscle, this muscle, that muscle. Um, so that's how he is on his left elbow. He is on his left.
Would he need his right lateral cervical bender though?
That is correct. Gravity is trying to bend his neck to the left because there's nothing to prop it on. So gravity is literally trying to prop his left ear to his left shoulder. So he would need right lateral. We were going to get to that one. We were just talking about the trunk, but very good observation, Olivia, that just because I needed the left lateral trunk doesn't mean I have to need left lateral cervical. Very astute observation. And guys, this should make
I
sense.
guess.
If you've ever done a crunch, aren't you using the muscles on the bottom, right? Well, that's what he's doing. He's using the muscles on the bottom. Those happen to be his left lateral trunk benders.
So what you're just to clarify that I understand is that he's on his left elbow, even though his right side wants to go down because of gravity. He's using his left to keep him up and stabilized.
Yeah, I don't know what you mean by
Yes?
right side wants to go down. Ground and all the external forces are trying to make him bend to his right.
Yeah, been to
Yeah, that's okay. I just wanted to clarify. And so if ground and gravity is trying to make you bend to your right, you need muscles that are trying to bend to your left. You would need the left side muscles, the muscles that are on the bottom. And so the circles or your lists help to say, well, who are those muscles? I've identified that I need muscles on the left side that are pulling to the left laterally. Who are those muscles? And that's what my teachings help you to identify. Who are the muscles that are on the left side of the belly button? Left rectus, left external, left internal, left erector. Jimmy, so it will be all the muscles on the right side of the cervical then, right cervical benders. Yes, but let's toss in that right lateral. Even though benders infers lateral, I like to say right lateral because it identifies right away the difference between right transverse and right lateral. So it would be right lateral cervical benders. Right lateral cervical benders. Who are those? Right sternocleidomastoid, right erector. So the circles didn't tell you who's working. Your lists don't tell you who's working. You have to figure out who's working, and then your circles or your list help say, well, who are those? What are the names? I need my barn is on fire. Who do I need to do a job? I need to call the fire department. Who are the firemen? They all have individual names, but collectively the group is the fire department or the firemen. And then whatever the men and women's names are the individual muscles, the individual players on the team that I need. So you identify the group. Gravity is trying to make me bend to my left, so I need right lateral pullers. Who are the right lateral pullers? The stuff on the right side of the AP axis, right sternocleidomastoid, right erector spinae. Or if you do lists, who are my right lateral cervical benders? Here's my list, right sternocleidomastoid, right erector spinae. Was that a helpful example, guys?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. And like I always say, there's going to be a couple of, I don't say more difficult questions. Every question I'm going to ask you is one we've done in class, but you got to make your 3-foot putts. I'm going to ask, most of my questions are going to be, what are the two functions of the tibialis anterior? Which of the following are functions of the gastrocnemius? Uh, what position would I want to put the ankle in to stretch the soleus? Most of the questions are going to be, you know, very straightforward, and then I'm going to sprinkle in a few like we just did here. But this won't be the majority. I'm not saying ignore it, but what I don't want you to do is say, I spent all my time on trying to memorize all these different things, and I didn't spend any time learning how muscles pull. That's the most important thing, is to know how the muscles pull. And then I'm trying to get you guys to, apply it a couple of ways, okay? Kennedy, can we clarify the knee to wall dorsiflexion ankle test? I think I know what you're referring to. So let me pull it up, and then you can guide me if I'm on the right track, okay? Let's see. I think it's this one. Tell me if this is correct. You guys see that? On my end, it's blurry. Is that correct, Kennedy? Is that correct? Is that the one you want me to go over? Let's see. Okay, well, I'm going to do it anyway, just in case. So the concept here is range of motion, or how much can the joints rotate, right? One of the limiting factors to several ranges of motion is muscles. Like if your muscles are tight, you can't move as much. Kind of common sense, right? That's why we stretch, muscles, because there is motion that we could be doing that we're not allowing ourselves to do. And so if we can learn how some muscles are affected at multiple joints, in this case, our gastrocnemius is affected at multiple joints, Our gastrocnemius is a plantar flexor and a knee flexor. What doing this stretch does is really emphasizes stretching all of the other plantar flexors that are not the gastroc. And the reason is because our knee is flexed. So the gastrocnemius is on slack at the knee. So therefore, it's not going to get stretched as soon when you dorsiflex. So putting the gastrocnemius, or here's another way to look at it. When your knee is extended, you won't get as much dorsiflexion. But when you slack the knee, you could get more dorsiflexion. It's all because of the gastrocnemius. An easier example that we use in class is if your knees are straight and you're testing your hamstrings, you're only going to have so much hip flexion, right? I won't have much at all because I'm very tight. But if I bend my knees, if I flex my knees and put those hamstrings on slack, I can flex my hip more. I could have more hip flexion because my hamstrings aren't a limiting factor. They're not getting in the way of my range of motion. So that is useful information that if you're trying to stretch the soleus, I remember personally, I had a strain to my soleus and my therapist was trying to get at it. And if she didn't bend my knee, my soleus couldn't have gotten stretched because my gastroc was going to be the first one to get stretched because it's getting stretched at both ends and it was going to stop my dorsiflexion. So she flexed my knee, put that gastroc on slack, and we were able to go further down into dorsiflexion, thus stretching the other plantar flexors. I hope that clarified your question.
If you're doing like a prone lying hamstring curl, would you be working the gastroc with that, or no, because it's not being plantar flexed?
Absolutely. Now, your ankle position will affect how much of that gastroc is, but the only time the gastrocnemius doesn't work as a knee flexor is when you're flexing the knee super fast, and that's because of leverage. We'll teach you that in biomechanics. But like if you're sprinting and you're trying to flex the knee really fast, it doesn't have the mechanical advantage to keep up with the other muscles. But if you're doing prone hamstring curls, knowing that your ankle position can affect the gastrocs contribution, say that 5 times real fast, then yeah, if you plantar flex while you're doing it, the gastrocs contribution is going to be less. And if you dorsiflex while you do it, the gastrocnemius's contribution is going to be more. Absolutely. And I think that's really cool. Like just how your ankle position can affect percent contributions of your knee flexion pullers. Yeah, the gastrocnemius wouldn't be stretched as much because it's on slack. It's you know, I love the hamstring example that if I'm trying to stretch my hamstrings and I feel that stretch, as soon as I bend my knee, that stretch goes away. I don't feel it anymore because I slacked it at the other end. I took off the stretch at the knee. So therefore, it's logical that I wouldn't feel the same stretch at the hip. Yep. So it wouldn't be stretched as much if my knee is bent and I'm in dorsiflexion or I'm dorsiflexed versus if I stayed in that position and I tried to extend my knee, ooh, I'd feel that a lot. Probably as I extend my knee, I probably wouldn't even be able to maintain that position of dorsiflex. So, you know, I'd probably, you know, come back a little bit because that muscle's so tight. But yeah, that's how that works. That we've done this example several times, like in the hip, where if I'm trying to stretch my hip flexors, if I flex my knee, my rectus is going to be the first one that's waving the white flag. And thus, the other hip flex being stretched at the knee and the hip. So if I want to stretch other hip flexors like the iliopsoas and the pectineus and those guys, I want to have my knee extended. I don't want to have my knee flexed. So therefore, the rectus won't be as tight. It won't be stretched as such an early hip position, and I'll be able to extend the hip back further and thus stretch those other hip flexors that wouldn't have gotten stretched if I had my knee flexed. That's all I'm trying to teach you guys. Length tension relationship and how muscles that cross multiple joints can get stretched at both ends, right? So I can stretch it like this, I could stretch it like this, I can slack it like this, or I can slack it like that. And when it comes to stretching, longer is stronger. So the longer you make it, the more it's going to be stretched, the more it's going to pull back. While it's on my mind, we did the example of soleus, right? The seated calf raise. You know, like this class should help explain why there's a difference. You're still working your plantar flexors, but when you're seated and your knees are flexed, the gastrocs contribution is less because it's on slack at the knee. So therefore, other muscles have to take up that slack. That's a term that's kind of commonly used. You know, if a shooter is off for the basketball team, someone's got to take up the slack. Someone's got to pick it up. Someone's got to step up. And so the muscle like the soleus is going to take up that slack and work more because the gastrocs on slack at the knee.
So with the standing calf raise,
Mm-hmm.
would either of them be? Neither would be at slack, really.
That's
would it?
correct. No,
Okay.
that you're right. But think of it like this. The soleus isn't affected by knee position, but the gastroc is. So when you extend the knee and the gastroc is like, oh, thank goodness, I'm no longer on slack. I can really contribute on this plantar flexion group. The soleus is like, thank God, dude. When we were doing that seated stuff, I was doing my job plus some. So it's not that anybody turns off. It's just that if you're doing, let's say for the sake of this conversation, let's fix an amount. Let's say you're doing standing calf raises with 100 pounds and seated calf raises with 100 pounds. So the work is the same. What I'm saying is that when you're seated, if the gastrocnemius can't contribute as much to that 100 pounds, other muscles have to take up that slack and have to be recruited more. So when you stand up and the gastroc is like, great, I can contribute more, then by default, the others can contribute less. And this is not only for like weightlifting, but in therapy and exercise. Like if an MRI shows that they have a damage to the soleus, eventually you're going to have to do things that emphasize or isolate the soleus. And so the seated stuff, the bench stretches and the flexed knee plantar flexor exercises, right? That's all identifying that you understand that I need to slacken that big old gastroc so that I could emphasize those other plantar flexors.
Still talking about the ankle and the subtalar. There was an image with the lady. She was sitting on her feet.
Okay.
It's one that we did in class.
Okay. Was it an exercise or was it a stretch?
It was a stretch.
Okay.
Sitting on her feet.
Let's see.
Let's see.
Was it something like this?
Yes. Yes.
Sweet. I got lucky. So her position, she would be plantar flexed. Do we agree that that would be her position of her ankles?
Yes.
So if she's plantar flexed, she would be stretching the muscles that pull in the direction of dorsiflexion. True? So she'd be stretching her dorsiflexors.
Okay.
Your circles or your lists help to tell you who those dorsiflexion pullers are. Tibialis anterior, extensor hallucis longus, extensor digitorum longus, peroneus tertius. But just knowing those muscles don't tell me how they pull. Remember, like those are just Latin names. That doesn't tell me how they pull. So I'm trying to insert the how they pull to help us see she's plantar flexed. So all the plantar flexors are going to be on slack and all the dorsiflexors are going to be stretched and lengthened. Who are those dorsiflexors? That's when we insert our circles or our lists to help us identify the muscles that are pulling up on your shoestring. So she's plantar flexed, so she would be stretching dorsiflexors.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. That's a really great question. I got super lucky finding that though, but I'm glad I found it. While I'm on the ankle, let me see if I could find a TheraBand exercise. Yoink. Okay, so would this exercise be working plantar or dorsiflexors? Notice I didn't go into specific muscles. I'm trying to identify a pulling group because I see why I need to recruit that pulling group. What is the TheraBand trying to do to the ankle? What motion is the TheraBand trying to do to the ankle?
Plantar flex.
Good. So I wouldn't need my plantar flexion pullers. I already have something trying to plantar flex me. I would need my dorsiflexion pullers in this exercise. True?
Mhm.
And so once you identify that group based off of who I need to pull, then you say, well, who are those muscles? Tibialis anterior, extensor, hallucis longus, extensor digitorum longus, peroneus tertius. That's how that works. Let me see if I could find a subtalar. Yoink. Okay. Plantar flexors or dorsiflexors for this exercise?
He's plantar flex, so it's dorsiflexors, right?
Well,
Or
what is grounding gravity trying to do when you go up on your toes?
pull you down.
Okay, and what motion would that be? If you're up on your toes and you relaxed all your muscles, what motion would?
Dorsal.
Yes. So if grounding gravity is trying to dorsiflex you, I don't
Mm.
think you need your dorsiflexion pullers, right?
The plantar
You
flexor.
need your plantar flexion pullers. You need your plantar flexors to go up on your toes and to come down from your toes. Like the elevator, right? The elevator makes you go up, but it also lets you go down while it's pulling up. So you need your plantar flexors. And then your circles or your lists help to remind you who all those muscles are. Yes, you got your gastroc and your soleus, your all stars, but you have other plantar flex, all the muscles that pull posterior, tibialis posterior, flexor hallucis longus, flexor digitorum longus, peroneus longus, and brevis, as well as the gastroc and the soleus. So I would need plantar flexors during this exercise. Concentrically, I'm going to see the plantar flexion, right, going up on your toes. And eccentrically, I'm going to observe the dorsiflexion, lowering you down off your toes. Was that a good example?
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
I have a question about it. So
Yeah, what you got?
to clarify, going from the first picture to the second picture, gravity's trying to pull down, so you need the dorsiflexors.
No, I need plantar flexors to go up on my toes.
Yeah, to go up, but to go down, you said it was dorsiflexors.
No, I need plantar. I said dorsiflexion. Remember, try not to confuse motion with muscles pulling. So the motion is dorsiflexion on the way down, but that motion was caused by my plantar flexors letting me go down.
Because the slack is
It's nothing
being
to do with slack. It's about who I need to pull. Gravity is trying to dorsiflex me the whole time, so I need plantar flexors the whole time.
yes, but going down though.
I still need the same muscles. They're just going to be working eccentrically to lower me down.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Never. Okay.
No, that's okay. That it's a common, our brains want to say this motion, this muscle, different motion, different muscle. That's what our brains want to say. And I'm trying to recondition your brain to say, no, different motion, same muscles, different motion, different contractions. Calves on the way up, calves on the way down. Concentric on the way up, eccentric on the way down. Plantar flexion on the way up, dorsiflexion on the way down. But it was the same muscles, and the different motions were because of different contractions of those muscles. Cool?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. You're very welcome. See if I could get another one here. Okay, what about this one? Would I need plantar flexors or dorsiflexors in this exercise? What is the TheraBand trying to do to my ankle?
Isn't it trying to dorsiflex?
Yes. So if the TheraBand is trying to dorsiflex me, do I need dorsiflexion pullers? Do I need dorsiflexors in this exercise, or would I need the muscles that are pulling the other way?
The other way, the plantar
Yes, very good. So I need plantar flexors in this exercise. Your circles help to remind you of those 7 major plantar flexors or your lists. Contraction-wise, it's going to go with the motion. I know that I'm working plantar flexors in this exercise. Plantar flexors pull in a direction of plantar flexion. So when I observe plantar flexion, that's got to be concentric contraction. Those muscles are doing what they're trying to do. They're causing motion in their direction of pull. Eccentric contraction of those muscles, that's why it's called a negative, is because the muscles are still pulling in a direction of plantar, but they're going to allow dorsi. The motion will be allowed in the opposite direction of those muscles pull. So that's like if an elevator is lowering you down, it's still the cable pulling up that's preventing you from getting hurt, but it's a negative because the upward pull is causing downward motion. More like the upward pull is allowing downward motion. So the concentric would be top to bottom because the plantar flexors are doing plantar flexion, and the eccentric would be bottom to top because the plantar flexors are allowing dorsiflexion. Let's see. Yoink. Let me see if I could find a subtalar.
Could you do the one where he was balancing on his right leg? I want to say that would that be Sub Taylor? We did that one. We have that one in our notes.
Yeah. So
That
if somebody, let me pull up let me pull up a picture just to make sure we're talking about the same thing, and then from there we'll definitely get into it. So if somebody is just balancing like this,
yeah, that works.
okay. So balance is going to be leverage. If you remember, first class levers help us to balance. And so if you ever notice when you're balancing, you're actually going to be fluctuating between inversion and eversion. Does that kind of make sense? And so your inverters and everters are going to be on both ends of the teeter-totter, kind of helping to keep your weight over your foot. So this exercise would be what we call a stability or a balance exercise, where you're going to be working kind of everything, trying to help maintain your balance. The inverters and the everters trying to work to keep you balanced.
So it wouldn't be just one, it would be both.
Oh, You would have to, yeah.
Okay.
If you think of it like this, if I was balancing and I said, hey, inverters contract, you'd fall over. Like if only one worked, you would tip the scale one way or the other. So that's why you're going to constantly be tweaking that teeter-totter, trying to maintain your balance. Let me get more of an exercise that would recruit inverters and or everters. And remember, guys, I strongly encourage to go back on those the previous lectures. Let's see if you have to. Okay, here's one. Okay, inverters or everters? Who would I need in this exercise?
Inverter.
Okay, let me
Well,
double check. The TheraBand is trying to do what to the subtalar joint?
Invert. So you
Good.
need
There you
invert.
go. Yeah, that's how it works. The TheraBand's trying to invert you. I don't need those muscles. The TheraBand's already trying to do that. I need eversion pullers. I need everters. Your circles or your lists help to identify who are those muscles that pull in that direction. Extensor digits, extensor digitorum, peroneus tertius, peroneus longus, peroneus brevis. Okay, now I need my everters, okay, because the TheraBand's trying to invert me. So the concentric contraction is going to be when I actually observe eversion. When my everters make me evert, they do it concentrically. And when my everters let me invert, they do that eccentrically. Make sense?
Yes.
No different than if we're doing curls. And I'm just going to use bicep because that's what we know, but I'm working my elbow flexors when I'm doing curls, but my elbow flexors or my bicep is on when I lower the weight down, and when I raise it up, I feel it in the same muscles. So how can the same muscles be responsible for different motions? And the answer is different contractions. Concentric, because my flexors are going to make me flex. Eccentric, because my flexors are going to let me extend. That's how that works. All right, guys, any last questions? I strongly encourage to go rewatch the lectures if you need, because you know we do. There's context, there's examples, and previous lectures that I posted on Moodle. I've said it, but maybe someone didn't hear it. I don't hear stuff that my family says all the time. That's okay. But I posted previous semesters lectures that may have more examples and more practice for you guys. And remember, the meat and potatoes of the test is muscles and function. Okay. How do they pull? A muscle does a job based off of its pull. Any last questions? Was this format, how about some feedback? Was this format useful? Being able to type in questions or verbally ask questions? Because I might, oh, what a great question. Yes, you guys are going to have scratch paper, and some of my students, I don't say all, but a lot of them, the first 5 or 10 minutes of the exam is literally just writing circles or writing lists. So once the test starts, you can put down all of your knowledge on that paper to use as a reference. So if you like to see the circles, the test starts, you could do every single circle on that scratch paper. Okay. Just remember, all I ask is that you have your name on the paper and that you turn it in I want them. So that way, when we go over your test, I can pull it out. So that way we could say, oh, you see how you listed it here? And it just helps as a teaching tool if I have the things that you learned so that we can look at if there's a problem or not. It just helps me as a teacher. All right, guys, hit me up if you need, okay? Remember, office hours are virtual. I'll FaceTime, I'll text, we could Zoom, whatever you need to clarify content, If you need to learn something, just go back to the old lectures. All right, guys, y'all be well.